Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Ray, the singing Tallit. I just had a good talk with J.R. Myers from over at Restoring the True Faith Ministries group. We were trying to do a together broadcast, and we're still learning the tools. So we spent so long actually trying to work out the technicalities of it that he's actually got to go over to his home group now and do the Torah study with them. But in the meantime, I'll go ahead and have this broadcast set up. We're going to read from the Torah portion called Mishpatim today. Get my my large print Bible out. Now, Mishpatim features Exodus 21 through 24, and the Haftorah portion is going to be from Jeremiah, and then we're going to read from in the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament. We're going to read, or I guess I should say renewed covenant, probably be the more Hebrew way to say it. We're going to be reading from Matthew, Mark, Acts, and Hebrews. So it's going to be pretty long. I'll probably end up breaking it into two pieces because unfortunately, I can't run my phone. I can't run my phone and have a microphone plugged into it at the same time, or it makes a terrible buzz. So I'm going to avoid that problem, and I may have to cut it into two separate portions. Got my large print Bible, so I hopefully won't lose my pace while I'm reading. But we'll go through and we'll discuss what we're reading and see if we can give ourselves a reminder about what we were reading last week. Last week we read in the Torah portion Yitro, that's Jethro, and as the people would say in English, that's Moses' father-in-law. The tradition among the Jews is that Yitro was actually a part of Pharaoh's court until the point that Pharaoh decided to kill a bunch of babies, and then he left and went down to Midian and became and didn't ever go back to Pharaoh's court. They also, some of them say, that the book of Job is contemporary with this, the Exodus that we're reading about. We're reading about the leaving of Egypt and the going to Sinai. At Sinai, we see the receiving of the Ten Commandments and the proclamation of what Jehovah wants, which is a royal priesthood. This is the proclamation that he's literally saying, I want you to be a kingdom of priests. You will be a sacred treasure. You will be a peculiar people. My special little angels. Well, literally, angelos, in the sense of being his messengers. You're going to have the job of helping to repair the world from the troubles that it's gone through. You're going to be a kingdom of priests, and you're going to help fix this place. And that's the idea. And among the Jews, that's called the tikkun, which is the tikkun olam, is the restoration of the world. Right? That's the overall overarching goal, is that we get everyone back on board with Yehovah the right way, get rid of the idolatry, get rid of the quote-unquote paganism, just get rid of the practices and the traditions that have taken people away from being able to worship Yehovah in spirit and truth. That's the overall idea. And again, this is not something that was unfamiliar to the Pharisees or modern-day Orthodox Jews. The modern Jews are the descendants of the Pharisees. When I say the Pharisees, sometimes I'm referring also to Orthodox Judaism, which is, it descends from the line that Yitro actually helped set up. See, Yitro goes out and he says to his son-in-law Moses, he's like, all right, Moses, you need to set up some judges to help you deal with all of these people, because you got 1 million people coming to you with their problems all day long. So you need to get somebody to help you. So let's make an organized system of a hierarchy of judges who will deal with all these different problems, so you don't have to deal with every little thing that comes through. Now, the trouble in doing that is that it also creates what's called the legal precedent. And I actually talked about this with JR, and the idea of the legal precedent is that when a decision has been made by a judge in the past, judges that come after him should make their decisions utilizing his reasoning and his decision that was made before. And that is exactly how the legal tradition works. In the West, well, hopefully, at least in the English legal tradition, that the precedent set by an earlier judge continues forward in the understanding of how to deal with problems. Unfortunately, that also means that certain men who get into positions of esteem and get known for being, very wise, or a Rav, as they're called, not just a rabbi, which is a regular teacher, but a Rav, which is the man, you might say, who's over a whole bunch of rabbis in a region, the guy who is really considered the great Zadik, of the people, like Rambam and Rabbi Akiva and other famous, big famous rabbis. Sometimes their word becomes law, or their Haggadah, or their explanations for why they think certain things work their way into becoming what people literally base future understandings of the Scripture on. Well, and that's a double-edged sword. In one hand, you're like, oh, it's great to have the advice of this, person who's spent their entire life studying the Scripture. On the other hand, you're like, but they also have biases and opinions that are connected to the time period in which they live, and the country in which they grew up, and the culture in which they were surrounded with, all these kind of different issues that we talk about today in our, I guess I would say, our more universally educated, literally as in universally educated at a university, where we say, well, consider the anthropological, the sociological, the psychological implications of why these different men thought the things that they do. So, basically what I would say is you just got to take everything with a grain of salt when you're reading the opinions of even some of the most learned and famous men. For instance, it was, I believe it was Rambam who wrote out who found and isolated the 613 mitzvah that are in the Torah, or Maimonides. And for that, we're thankful, because it was great for somebody. But you can understand, that was in the Middle Ages. But it was great for somebody to finally actually sit down and say, what is it we're actually being told to do? So we can just write all those things down and make sure we're doing them. And that's a scholarly work like that we're very thankful for. But he's also got lots of opinions on, how people should do things and what should and should not be done. And a lot of modern Judaism is the continuation of the judgments and opinions of rulers and judges who came before. And these, of course, are the rabbis, the learned men of the time. And people would, even question, why do we have to worry about that? What about when Peter got up before the judges of Israel and they said, you got to quit teaching about Yeshua as the Messiah. You got to quit that. And they said, well, it's better that we obey God than that we obey men. But written into the Torah, it seems to imply that when a judge is concerned, you have to obey the decision that they make. And if the decision handed to them was stop preaching them, then you got to ask the question, well, do they even have a right to continue? And I'm sure for some of the Jews, they were like, absolutely not. The judges have ruled, you need to stop right now. And then for others, it'd be like, the judges are making a mistake. We're going to have to make our own court of judges to deal. And that's exactly what happened. And you see in Acts 15, Paul takes the question about circumcision to this de facto Sanhedrin of the disciples of Yeshua, which Peter was the head of in Jerusalem. Which, naturally that's going to cause a rift with the local Jewish community, because there's already established rulers and leaders in the area who would probably be very offended by these lower judges making rulings. And also it would probably cause there to be a division. And probably where they're like, look, your Rabbi Peter, student of Rabbi Yeshua, can give you his Haggadah or his opinions, but if you don't practice the law as it has been stated, then there will be consequences. And this is like when Paul brings the Greek disciples to the temple and has their heads shaved, and he pays the fee for them to go through the Nazarite vow, a great uproar took place, because people are like, those men cannot be here. It's clearly written on the sign outside, no non-Israelites are allowed in this area. And even though Paul, as you see in Romans 2, is of the opinion that a man who has a heart circumcised is a Jew, and he has every right to be there and to come to know his God, that wasn't what the rulers were saying. And it was clearly written on the signs outside of the temple that if you non-Jews enter into the area that's set aside for Israelites, you will be killed. And the Romans are not going to stop us from killing you. And that's the kind of idea that was being expressed at the time. So let's get into the actual reading. And again, we're at Mount Sinai. Yehovah is speaking to Moses about what he wants from his people. What does he want from this peculiar people, from this special bride, from his special treasure? Chapter 21 of Exodus. Now these are the judgments which I shall set before them. Which you shall set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years will he serve, and the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gave him a wife, and she bore him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's. And he shall go out by himself. If the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, and I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him unto the judges, and he shall also bring him to the door, or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. So this is the piercing of the ear. Take an awl and actually pierce the man's ear, and that's why earring is a sign of slavery. It's a sign of servitude. When you have an earring, it means you're a slave. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed, to sell her unto a strange nation. He shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. And if he hath betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. And if he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. And if he do not these three unto her, there shall she go out free, without money. So, if you marry one of your slave girls, she has all the rights and privileges of any other wife that you have. You can't treat her like the slave girl wife. You have to treat her like any other wife that you got from anybody else. And if you can't do that, you have to let her go. Now, it does say she goes without money. So, in other words, there's no dowry that you pay her when she leaves. So, if you marry one of your slave girls, it is the cheaper out if you do divorce. He that smites a man so that he die shall surely be put to death. And if a man lie not in wait, but Elohim deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint you a place whither you shall flee. But if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die. And he that smites his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. So this is this is a law concerning murder. So if you lie in wait and cold-blooded kill someone, you're going to be executed, no doubt about it. If a person accidentally dies, or at least you say it was an accident, you're going to have to flee to the cities of the Levites, which have not specifically been said yet because this is still in the wilderness. But there will be an instruction that you must go and flee to the city of the Levites, and you will stay there until such time as the judge has an opportunity to decide what to do about your case. If you leave the city of the Levites and you're killed out in the land somewhere, there's no retribution for you being executed by they call it the avenger of blood. Usually that's a father or a brother or somebody who is going to kill you in revenge for the person that you have killed, whoever that may be. But like I said, if it was an accident and you can prove it was an accident, you better run as fast as you can to the cities of the Levites, and they will keep you safe until such time as judgment can be rendered. All right, but if you smite your father or your mother, so you will surely be put to death. So if you're the kind of person who likes to beat up your parents, that's execution in Israel. And he that steals a man and sells him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. If you are a slaver, if you're a slaver of men, you'll be put to death. Okay? And he that curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. So speak well of your parents, even if you don't like them. You still need to treat them with the value that they are vested with, because you would not be alive without them. You owe your life to them, and whether you like them or not, you better give them the respect that has earned them, because they open the door for you to be a part of this world. And if men strive together, and one smite another with a stone or with his fist, and he dies not, but keeps his bed, If he rise again and walk abroad upon his staff, then then shall he that smote him be quit. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall cause him to be until it is caused that he be thoroughly healed. So if you injure somebody, you cause them damages, but they survive it, and they're able to get back into normal life, you owe that you must pay all of the expenses and all their loss in works and wages. So if you, like say if you were in an accident with somebody, you would have to pay the medical bills. If the accident's your fault, you need to be paying those medical bills. If it's not, then they need to pay your medical bills. Nobody gets away from the responsibility of the debt that they incur by harming another person. And this is a part of our legal tradition too, in the West, or at least in the English West. If you cause harm, you have committed a crime. And you can then be prosecuted at law for the damages that you have done. And this is the biblical mandate for those things that we have today. If a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die not under his hand, he shall be sorely punished. Oh, sorry. And if your servant dies under your hand, I was about to say, that didn't make any sense. If you beat your slave to death, there will be consequences. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. If men strive and hurt a woman with a child. Okay, so if you beat your slave almost to death, but you're only supposed to beat anybody with 40 lashes at the maximum, because if you do more than that, it says that you're damaging their dignity, but honestly, I mean, at what point have you literally peeled the skin off of them and they're just going to bleed to death? If you beat your slave and it takes them more than 2 days to get back to work, there's going to be a problem. But if they can get back to work after 2 days of rest, then you didn't beat them that bad. They can quit complaining about it. But if you beat a slave to death, because you got to remember these are rules concerning an Israelite as a slave to another Israelite. You end up in slavery either because you owed money and you got to work off that money, or you literally had your ear pierced to the door and said, I want this man to be my caretaker. I want this man to actually be the one that runs my life for the rest of my life. And I will serve him, and he can make the decisions because he knows what he's doing. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be sorely punished, according to as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. So if you hit a woman who's pregnant, her husband can decide what the punishment is going to be on you. Now, this is not a punishment unto death, but certainly the judges will help to decide how much money you owe that family for the injury that you have caused them. And if any mischief follow, you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. If a man smite okay, so let's stop there. So people are like, well, that's what God says, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But it's also being written here following a particular statement. If any mischief follow. So, if the judges say you owe him 10,000 shekels, that's probably way more than is a realistic amount. But let's just say you owe him, I don't know, $1 million in damages for what you did. If you refuse to pay, then they'll say to you, well, that's okay. Then we'll just do to you what you did to him. So if you, and of course, and this is why there are judges, because every punishment is not equal. Like you might say, an eye for an eye. I want your eye put out because you put out my eye. Well, what if the guy that put out your eye only had one eye? Then he's going to be straight up blind when you put out the one good eye he's got left. So that it can be that balance in your eyes. The point is, this is not where you need to get to. You need to handle things appropriately. And of course, in the New Testament, we're taught you need to handle things one-on-one. You need to go first to the person, let them know what's up. And if they have a problem with that, then you bring a witness. And if they will not do properly before the witness, and you take them before the entire community and say, okay, we need a judgment here because this guy will not listen to reason. And maybe I'm being unreasonable. So I'm going to let everybody hear what I have to say. You guys let me know what you think. And that's, again, that's part of our legal tradition with the jury, where we have a group of people who come together who are not supposed to be on anybody's side. They're supposed to be a third party, and they just listen to what's being said and say, well, is that fair? You know, is this guy asking for something that's fair? And if so, we need to make sure he gets what he needs. All right, so remember that. If any mischief follow is the statement before the eye for the eye and the tooth for the tooth. All right, and if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. So here we go. This is not eye for an eye. It just said if you're someone's servant and they accidentally put your eye, or they put your eye out, hopefully it's on accident, then they owe you your freedom. They don't owe you an eye. They owe you your freedom. Okay? And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for the tooth's sake. So if you hit somebody in the mouth that knocks a tooth out of them, they just got a free ride, and they don't owe you anything anymore. If an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and if his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. So, if you got an animal that gores somebody and they die, then that animal is to be stoned and killed. So if an animal kills a human, that animal's dead. There's no question about it. The animal's going to be killed, and the flesh will not be eaten. The animal is unclean to you. But the owner of that animal doesn't owe anyone damages, because animals can be crazy. But, and here's the stipulation, but if the ox were wont to push with his horns in times past, and if he have testified, and it has been testified to the owner, and he has not kept him in, but then he kill a man or a woman, and the ox shall be stoned, and his owner shall also be put to death. So if you got a wild animal, and everybody lets you know, say, look, man, that animal's wild, you need to put that thing down. If you want to keep him, you need to breed him and kill him, because that animal is dangerous. He's going to kill somebody. And as soon as that's said to you, and it happens, you're going to die for it. You're going to pay. You're going to pay with your life. If there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for a ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. So if you are lucky enough that somebody says, we don't want you to die, but we want this much money and damages, you better pay him. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, I done jumped ahead. And if there be laid on him a sum of money that he shall give for a ransom of his life, whosoever is laid upon him. All right, so like we said, whether he have gored a son or gored a daughter, according to the judgment, shall it be done unto him. So if your animal injures somebody, you're going to be paying damages. If the ox shall push a manservant or a maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. Now it says, shall push. Let's look at what that word means. This is Exodus 21. And again, right now we're reading the law. These are laws. These are the instructions which Jehovah is giving to the people of Israel concerning how they deal with being with one another, because they've just lived their entire lives as slaves. Every one of them was a slave. None of them made decisions. All decisions were made by the taskmaster, whoever the slave master was that was over them. If they had a problem, they had to go to the slave master. Slave master would solve it. That's who solves problems. You don't solve problems. If you try to deal with one another and solve a problem, you're overstepping your boundaries. You don't even have the right to deal with one another. You must go to Pharaoh's man to handle any dispute between one another. That's the system. Hopefully that's not how they actually were, but there probably were many who, when you live a life in slavery, it tends to make you at odds with the other slaves, which that's part of the slave system, is they play the difference between people off of each other. And you'll see this in places where people are different races, different colors, different ethnicities. You'll see governments will draw lines around them and make tribal groups. This is called Balkanism. This is the political term for it. This is what the Soviets did. They balkanized different racial and ethnic groups when they made the Soviet states to create animosity between the groups, which would keep them fighting each other and looking at each other angrily, instead of looking towards the government to say, what do we really need? Who do we really need to change? How are we really going to fix this thing? And it's the same thing that's done in the United States today with racism. Keep fanning the flames of racism, Because as long as you can keep people at each other's throats, they won't really fix anything. They'll be too busy hating each other. And unfortunately, it's a good tactic for keeping people in line. If you can keep them hating something or fearing something, this is 1984, the book, if you ever read George Orwell's 1984. If you can keep other people hating something or afraid of something, it'll keep them from stepping out of line. That's the idea. All right, so let's see. So if he shall push, what is the word push? Nagash? Nachash? Nagak. To thrust or to gore. So, to strike with the horns. So if your animal gores a manservant or a maidservant, you owe their master 30 shekels of silver. It didn't say necessarily that it killed him, but you owe him 30. And you understand 30 shekels of silver is the price of a slave. That means you paid their master the entire price of a slave. I hope that means that person got to leave slavery, but it doesn't actually say that. And if a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit, and not cover it, or an ox or an ass falls therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good, and give money unto the owner of them, and of the dead beast, and the dead beast shall be his. So if you open up a hole, dig a hole somewhere, and somebody's animal falls in, you owe them the money for the animal, but you get to keep the animal. You can do what you want to with it. And if one man's ox hurt another's, and then he die, then he shall sell the live ox and divide the money for it, and the ox and the dead ox also they shall divide. Or if it be known that the ox hath used to push in times past, the owner hath not kept him in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his own. So you can imagine if you got like a male ox that's kind of violent but very muscular, and a fine specimen of cattle, and you breed him with somebody else's cow, and he kills that cow in the process. You're like, well, that happens. Let's sell that violent ox of yours, and we'll divide up the money, and we'll divide up the dead cow, and we'll call it even, and that's it. I killed your prize cow, but I'm losing my prize bull in the process. So it's just the way things are. However, if everyone knows that ox or that bull has a known history of being a killer of men or other animals, then if he kills that prize cow, then you owe him that killer beast. You owe him the whole beast. You don't get nothing. So needless to say, there is a precedent being set here of, if you keep animals who are violent and deadly, you better be real careful with them, because if they hurt anybody or anything, it's all falling on you. So if you're one of these people that's got a dog that you let roam around everywhere, and that dog bites somebody, that's on you. You're paying every penny for the medical bills, and if that dog kills somebody else's animal, that dog becomes theirs, and you're going to owe them for the medical bills, probably trying to keep the dog alive or whatever. Needless to say, don't be one of those people who does not mind their things. That's one of the core ideas behind kingship, is that you take responsibility for what is yours. The concept in the insurance world is liability. Why do people drive cars with liability insurance? Because you are not responsible for what happens behind that wheel if you are abiding by the laws of the state. You take the driver's test, you understand the road signs, you keep the speed limit where it's supposed to be, you do everything as instructed by the government, and at the end of the day, if you crash headlong into somebody and there's no proof that you broke any law, no big deal. The insurance company will pay for it, because you were never liable for what happened. That's the essence of kingship, is liability. If everybody drove around with no insurance, and everyone knew if you scratched somebody else's paint or bumped somebody or did anything to anybody, you're going to pay every one of the medical bills. There'd probably be a lot less people driving, because it'd just be too dangerous to do. Or shall we say, too high a price to pay just to have your car. All right, let's see. If that owner shall dig a pit, the dead ox says. All right, all right, let's move to chapter 22 now. We're moving on to Exodus chapter 22. So again, we're getting our lesson on kingship here. These laws that we're learning about are the laws of handling your business appropriately as an owner of property, which includes other persons. and an owner of animals. We haven't quite got to the best. Well, I mean, even with the ownership of your land, because if you dig a pit in your land, you're responsible for what you did. And again, these are all ideas that are worked into the English common law system, which is what most of American law is built on. For anybody who didn't know, I'm in the United States, in South Georgia, reading this and talking about the legal precedent set up in the United States. And again, we're reading Torah portion Mishpatim, which is instructions. So we're getting our instructions right now. If a man shall steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen for 1 ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. So if you steal somebody's stuff, you're going to be paying back 4 to 5 times of what you stole in the value to that person. And of course, I assume if you stole it, it's because you ain't got nothing anyways, in which case you're going to be a slave. And not only you're not going to be a slave for the amount that you stole, you're going to be a slave for 5 times or 4 times the amount that you stole. If a thief be found breaking up, or be smitten that he die, there shall no blood be shed for him. If the sun be risen upon him, there shall be blood shed for him, for he should make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So there you go, you be that slave. You got to understand, it says if you be found, and this is the King James English. Let's look up what it means. He said, if you shall be found breaking up. All right, breaking up is, let's see, machtereh. That means breaking in, as in committing burglary. So if it's night and you're breaking in and you're in somebody's tent or their house or whatever, and they kill you, well, too bad for you, because you should have known better. And that's similar to the way the law here is in Georgia. We have a law basically where if someone's in your home, you can kill them. And so be careful. Hopefully no one would ever do it, and I'm sure there'll be an investigation if it happens. But if you're breaking into somebody's home and you get shot, that's just the way it is. You should have known, but you never break in another person's home. That's a no-no, kids. You don't do that. And if mom and daddy didn't teach you that, we're sorry, but this bullet will teach you. And that's exactly what's being discussed here, is if you come in that house and the master of that house slays you, oh well. What were you doing in there? Doesn't matter now, because dead men don't tell stories. And that's exactly the way it goes. If you, I think it's what Daddy always said. If somebody's breaking in your house, you kill them. Because dead men don't have arguments to make. They can't try to justify, lie their way out of what they did, because they're dead. Now, the other side of that is, if you are caught in daylight doing something, that means somebody sees you, running in and stealing something, running away. Nobody has a right to kill you. Okay, this is not a violent, crazy, oh, I hope I catch somebody killing today or stealing today so I can kill him. Nothing like that. No, it's basically the life of the Israelite is much more important. But frankly, if you're doing stuff in the middle of the night, you is an unscrupulous person to begin with, and if you get killed, nobody's going to care. Only your fleas will mourn you, right? I can't remember what movie I saw that in. When you die, only your fleas will mourn you. But if you get caught in theft, you're going to make full restitution. And again, it just said full restitution can be 5 times as many oxes, 4 times as many sheep. So the judge will probably lay a burden on you somewhere around that. So if you're stealing somebody's chicken, 5 chickens worth. You ain't got no money, that's fine. You're gonna spend some time in the life of a slave. Remember, slaves only 30 shekels of silver. That's what it costs to become a slave. If the theft be certainly found in the hand alive, whether it be an ox or an ass or a sheep, he shall restore double. So somebody sees you steal something, and they get you, you owe them twice what you took. Even though it says before, 5 times for the oxes, 4 times for the sheep. So if you snuck around and did it around somebody's back, which is why people would brand their animals, by the way. You snuck around and did it behind somebody's back, you're going to pay a lot more. But hopefully if you're desperate enough to run there and try to steal something and other people can actually see you do it, it's because you're destitute poor and they're going to understand you need somebody. Well, number one, you can't steal. You're going to pay for what you did. But at the same time, you're going to become probably a slave in the household of the person which you stole from, which is going to lead to you having the opportunity to become a part of that person's household. All right. And if a man shall cause a field or a vineyard to be eaten, and shall put in his beast, and shall feed in another man's field, of the best of his own field, and of the best of his own vineyard shall he make restitution. So if you let your animal go run around somebody else's field, and your animal eats up their stuff, then you have to pay them from the best of what you have. And when it says the best, we're talking about the king's ransom. We're talking about literally the flawless type of stuff that you would offer at the temple goes to the person that you did damages to. And if a fire break out and catch in the thorns, so that the stacks of corn or the standing corn of the field be consumed therein, he that kindleth the fire shall surely make restitution. If a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, it shall be stolen out of them. Okay, well, let's go back to the fire bit. So if there's a fire on your property and it goes to your neighbor's property, you pay them the restitution for whatever it is, whatever damage you caused. If a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. So as you see, apparently money is not even worth as much as the animals. If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges to see whether he have put his hand unto his neighbor's goods. Uh-oh. Let's read that again. If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges to see whether he have put his hands upon his neighbor's goods. So it looks like you are being held responsible for the actions of your slaves. And this is exactly what I've said to some people concerning Yeshua and us being his slaves. Because it's not simply that we are, we're not an entity unto ourselves. We don't, in America, there's a tendency to be very independent, free-willed, and not connected to other things. That don't fly in the Israelite world, okay? You come in to Yeshua's house as a slave. You don't have the capacity to make your own decisions. You don't have the capacity to run your own show. You don't get to have your own house. You don't get any of your own stuff. Everything is his. You are his. You have been bought with a price. Okay? That also means that he is responsible for you when you're screwing up and doing the things you shouldn't do. That means he has the opportunity to whoop you personally for what he does not like, and he also has to pay your debts. So if you run around, you do some stealing, and they can't nail you for it, they can't prove you did it, then they're going to go after your master and say, I think your slave stole from us. Why don't you go ahead and pay for him? If the thief be not be found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges. So, maybe we should all be a little more careful. I don't like the idea of Yeshua being brought before judges. For all manner of trespass, whether it be for ox or for ass or for sheep or for raiment, for any matter of lost thing which another challengeth to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whom the judges shall condemn, he shall pay double unto his neighbor. So you better hope you got some unbiased judges in Israel, because he just said, if someone accuses you of something, the judge has the right to say, all right, it's your fault, pay him double. And you cannot defy the ruling of a judge. And to defy the ruling of a judge is to invite a death penalty. And that'll be, we'll learn that later, but it's coming. So if the neighbor ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep, and it die or be hurt or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he hath not put his hand into his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good. So if the judges say, look, man, there's not enough evidence here for us. Well, let's read that again. This is one of those. If a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep, and it die or be hurt or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he hath not put his hand into his neighbor's goods, and that the owner shall thereof, and he shall not make it good. Okay, so if somebody gives you something to watch on your property, and it disappears off your property, and you don't know what happened to it, then you're not liable for it. Because they put it on your property, you're not liable for what happens to your property. Unfortunately, this is something that's very iffy in our legal system nowadays, because sometimes people will leave stuff on your property. It might harm somebody, and then somebody's like, well, it's your fault, it's on your property, we're going to try to sue you for it. But then you might say, well, that's not even my property. Why is it even here? How did that even get here? Or somebody might park their car in your yard, and the car gets stolen. They're like, well, I'm suing you for the cost of my car because it was stolen out of your yard. And you're like, well, I didn't steal it. I didn't have anything to do with it getting stolen. And in some legal traditions, you may become liable for the damages. Like that might go on your homeowner's insurance or something like that. You may be considered liable. Just something to consider. Hopefully you keep your friends around and deal with people who love you and care about you, because there's people who abuse the law and abuse the system. That is for sure. All right. And if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner thereof. Oh, Lord. We better reread that whole thing. Then shall an oath of the Lord be between them. He hath not put his hands on the neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept, and he shall not make it good. And if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner thereof. If it be torn in pieces, then let him bring it for a witness, and he shall not make good that which was torn. And if the man borrow out of his neighbor, and it be hurt or die, the owner therefore being not with it, he shall surely make it good. Ooh, man, this is getting tough. But if the owner therefore be with it, and shall not make it good, if it be a hired thing, it came for his hire. And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. And if a father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. Whew, that's a lot of stuff right there. So in one sense, it looks like it's saying, if you don't know what happened to the property that was left there, you're not liable for it. And then it says, but if it be stolen from him, he shall make it. Okay, I got it. So you have to swear an oath before God, right? You don't know. But if you can't swear that oath because the thing was stolen and you know it was stolen, then you owe the person that it was stolen from. If it be torn in pieces, then let him bring it for witness, and he shall not make good that which was torn. All right. And if the man borrow out of his, so it's like if there's some parts of the animal, that probably means if an animal came and actually killed the animal that someone left with you, then you don't owe him for what was torn apart by those animals. If a man borrow out of his neighbor, and it be hurt or die, or the owner thereof being not with it, he shall surely make it good. But if the owner therefore be with it, he shall make it good, for it is a hired thing as it came for hire. If a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, okay, well here's, all right, well we're entering into different territory here. Man, there's so much legal intricacy that's being expressed. Like, it sounds like it's straightforward, but there will be decision upon decision upon decision that all this stuff is a foundation for, and it could get real weird over time. All right, well, let's go to this part. If a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, so that's a young woman who is not betrothed to marry somebody, and he lie with her, has sex with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. So he's like, you got to marry her. Sorry, you don't get to play around, fellas. If you If you lay with a young maid, you have taken her value from her, so you have to marry her now. And if her father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of the virgins. Now, I believe that this is 50 shekels of silver according to what's written in Deuteronomy. That would be the price of both a male and female servant, which might even be so far as to say that the young man becomes a slave in that older man's house for what he did, which is what happened, which is exactly what Laban did to Jacob when he said to Jacob, you can have Rachel, but you have to serve me for 7 years, because that would be a 7-year stint as a slave. That's a 30 shekels of silver for the price for a man, right? And of course he gave him Leah instead. He's like, well, it's okay, you can still have Rachel, but you have to serve me another 7 years, because I had to get rid of my older daughter first. You have to marry the older one off first. So he spent 14 years as a slave to Laban, paying off this price twice that we're talking about here. All right, you will not suffer a witch to live, and witch, that word actually means a whisperer, and there's different types of understanding. It could mean a person who is tries to manipulate the system, as in whispers the things that they want and talks quietly to people to get power over other people. And it could also literally mean a whisperer, like the Greeks had the Oracle of Delphi. They had temple prostitutes who would go into weird trances and whisper and give people oracles and stuff like that. Whosoever lies with a beast shall surely be put to death. So no bestiality. I'm sorry. He that sacrifice unto any god, save unto Jehovah only, he shall be utterly destroyed. So if you got another god and you're presenting an offering to an idol or something, that's not going to work. That will cost you your life. You shall neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not afflict any widow or child or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any wise, and they cry at all unto me, I will surely hear their cry. So, and we remember from the book of James, the caring for widows and orphans is very important to Jehovah. You shall not afflict any widow. If you go after a widow, and she cry out to God because the burden you're putting her under, the hammer is going to come down hard on you. Same way if it is a fatherless child. If you mistreat a fatherless child, you can expect a harsh punishment directly provided to you by Jehovah. He says, my wrath shall wax hot. I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. Now, we've been reading these laws, right? And every law that we have read has been man to man and judges to the people. This has been, if you do this, you're going to have to pay this. If you do this, you're going to have to be executed. You do this, yada, yada. And it's very kind of distant and third party, the way that Jehovah is dealing with it. But when it comes to widows and orphans, he says, if you do this, I'm going to personally kill you. And when he says with the sword, that means he's literally going to send war against you. He's going to find people who are your enemies who will literally kill you with the sword, not take you into slavery. No. Who just want to murder you, and he'll let them murder you. He will find somebody out there that is more than ready to kill you and let him kill you. That's the kind of punishment that he's promising for a person who puts a heavy burden on a widow or an orphan or fatherless child. Fatherless child. So that might even be the children of a single mother, where if you, I would hope you wouldn't do that in general, but if you've been justifying to yourself that it's okay if you do that, it's not. According to the law, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. All right. And worst of all, he's literally saying he's going to get so angry at you, he is going to make sure you die. If you lend money to any of my people that is poor, compared to you, you shall not be to him as a usurer, neither shall you lay upon him usury. So if somebody asks you to borrow money because they're poor, loan them the money, don't charge them interest, and you're going to find out sooner or later you might as well just give it to them, because there's not really much you can do to get it back from them, because once the Shemitah year comes anyways, the debts are all wiped clean. I mean, he can just ride it. If he can ride it out for the full 7 years if he's got to, or just a few months if the Shemitah is rolling around, they literally will never have to pay it back to you anyways. So doesn't mean you have to like them. You have to love them. Doesn't mean you got to like them. So, there may be the idea that hopefully the idea is that Israel, just like you was taught in the church, where a brother is in need and you give it to him. Okay, that's old Exodus law being restated. But the idea is that Israel has got to grow together and become more beautiful together and to mature together. Okay, that's the idea. So we are becoming a more beautiful and robust and healthy bride when we're helping one another to grow and increase. All right, that's the idea. But yes, there are probably certain people who are going to be shiftless layabouts who are going to milk the system for whatever they can get out of it. But there's a lot of law in here, and they'll probably break one of those sooner or later and end up a slave. And then you won't have to worry about lending them money, because it'll be up to their master to keep them fed. All right. If you at all take your neighbor's raiment to pledge, you shall deliver it unto him by the time the sun goes down. And of course, Yeshua will say, if someone asks you for your cloak as a promise, he said, go ahead and give them I guess it's Tallit. What did he say? Maybe he means if you give your Tallit as a promise. We'll read it later. But that's where this comes from, the idea of clothes being used as a promise. And you see here that the law is that if you do give your clothes as a promise, they have to be returned to you by the end of the day. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin. Wherefore shall he sleep? And it shall come to pass, when he cries out unto me, I will hear him, for I am gracious. All right. You shall not revile the gods, nor curse the ruler of your people. All right. Well, I got a feeling that word revile, quote unquote, gods, is actually not gods. It's probably Elohim, but probably meant to be as in judges. Let's see. Exodus 22:28. I'm going to read this a little closer. I got my Blue Letter Bible up, which allows me to look up the definitions of words using the Strong's Concordance. There's plenty of people who complain. I mean, I'm sure if people that are real Hebrew scholars, good for you if you were raised speaking the language, but I wasn't, so I have to use the books. Yes, the word is Elohim, and it says, you shall not revile. So what is revile? That's kalal. Kalal, a primitive root, literally swift, small, sharp, or figuratively easy, trifling, vile, abate, to make bright, bring into contempt, curse, despise, to treat them lightly. Okay, so in this case, Elohim means judges. And let's see. And you shall not curse the ruler, and that is the word nase, or nasi, nasi. Nasi, the one who is lifted up, a prince, a general name used both of kings and also of the leaders of particular tribes. So the local ruler who has given you a instruction, you need to heed what he says and obey it. Don't treat it like it don't mean nothing when they hand down a judgment. And that also goes for the men who are established to run your tribe. If they've got some kind of ordinance that they've set down for your tribe, that you guys need to be doing certain things a certain way, you need to listen to what they have to say. Don't just ignore it. And this, of course, is why it can become very hard to walk this line of trying to be a follower of Yeshua, but understanding too that there is a tremendous amount of not just these laws. I mean, I'm just reading out the Old Testament. This is out of the Torah. This is the law of Moses, right? So not just these laws, but thousands of laws based off of these laws that continue to grow and to grow and to grow. And it continues to this very day. There's still Jewish leaders out there right now making ma'azim, I think is the word for it, or takanot. They're making the proclamations and instructions that the Jewish people in general are supposed to follow. Now, Nehemiah Gordon does a great video called The Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus. The Hebrew Yeshua is a person who is, comes up in this world and understands the importance of of both the halakha and the Haggadah, and how they are different. Each individual rabbi had his own interpretations and reasons why he taught people certain things. But the halakha was what Pharisees taught. That is to say, the halakha is the walk. That is just like you'd say that Adam and Yehovah halakha together and I'm using the English chopping up of that word, but they walked together in the garden. They halakha together in the garden. With that idea, when you listen to the halakha or the instructions, you have to understand that you can't just throw it out. You can't just throw out the baby with the bathwater as it goes. You're going to have to listen to it. You're going to have to read the Mishnah. You're going to have to go through. And remember, that was written in 300 something AD. That was the collection of law up to that time. Then you got your Talmud, which is expository writings about what's in the Mishnah. And that's a lot of writings from a lot of different people trying to understand all these different Mishnaic revelations or just oral traditions that have been passed down. It's not a small task to try to walk and to be in this world. I mean, a lot of people be like, well, I'm just going to do what Jesus did. Well, that's fine. That's a great way to start. But over time, the more you learn, the more you see in what Yeshua is talking. Because there's lots of times he says stuff that just don't make no sense unless you know what he's actually talking about. And he tries to explain. He explains it to his disciples using his Haggadah. He uses his parables to try to make it clear the things he's explaining to his disciples. But lots of times when he speaks to the multitudes, he talks to them just pretty much the way the scriptures do. And unfortunately, for people who are not, highly trained scholars, it can be very difficult to understand what is being talked about. And like I said, we just read, where the judges are concerned and where the princes of your tribe are concerned, you need to listen to what they have to say. So, and this is the place where I'm at right now. Sooner or later, when you start walking this walk, you're going to have to decide, how much of the Mishnah do I keep? How much of the halakha do I keep? I only got 4 Gospels telling me about Yeshua. And like it says, if there'd have been a book written about everything he did, there'd be more books than there are room in the world to keep it in. And that was kind of a phrase, I think that was at the end of the Gospel of John, which is simply to say, we don't know everything he said. He gave us the spirit of truth so that we could understand it, but you have got to learn the truth, which is the law. If you don't know the law, you're not going to be able to understand why you should do things a certain way. All right, here we go. Let me not belabor the point that I've made far too many times already. All right. So again, you're not allowed to sacrifice unto other gods. You shall neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So hospitality, you have a commandment here to be hospitable to people. You can't, vex means to like put a barricade up in front of them. You can't block people. You can't make it hard for them to deal with you. You got to treat them like you want them to be there with you. You want to teach them about, and frankly, that's the job. You should be wanting to teach people about Yehovah. They should come into your house and be jealous to be like you because of how good Yehovah is to you. Unfortunately, we read in the New Testament, now it's turned, it had been flipped over on its head. Now, God is being so good to Christianity, or that's the hope, right? Is that he would be so good to Christianity and give so much for so little, honestly, that the Jews would look and say, why do you have peace? Why do you have peace of mind? Why don't I have that? I'm the one that's doing what's supposed to. And again, that's the idea, too, that you would provoke them to jealousy. That you would make them say, He's not your God, he's my God. Why is he being nice to you? Why is he paying attention to you? Why do you think he's giving you stuff? You know, that's the idea. Jealousy is a righteous anger you feel when someone's trying to steal something from you. Okay? So they should look at you and say, why are you trying to steal our God? Why are you trying to steal? He's mine. He's my husband. Think about it like women arguing over a man. That's my man. He's my man. He takes care. Why are you doing that? Because he's doing something. Because that man is going out to another woman who's poor, who has nothing, and he's giving her the privilege of being his wife the way a slave girl is a wife. Okay? And we read the law concerning that. The slave girl wife is treated with all of the privileges and respect that the normal wife is. Wife number 2 gets just as much beautiful treatment as wife number 1 does, though she is a slave. But when she leaves the house, if she walks out, she ain't getting nothing. She ain't taking nothing with her. Ain't no divorcing him. He's master. You don't divorce master. And if you feel you need to, well, you better get ready to support yourself because he ain't paying for you. Unfortunately, it's not quite the same when it's the wife that's the covenant wife, because she's the wife who can say, I want a divorce and I want my dowry back. And I want my pay for all the good treatment I've given you, et cetera, et cetera. And then the judges can help make that decision. All right, let's see here. And you shall be an oxen, sheep. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in Egypt. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. And we read that already. You shall not take a covering. You shall not delay to offer the first of your ripe fruits and of your liquors. The firstborn of your sons shall you give unto me. So we've actually seen that already. The first to open the matrix is the way the King James says it. That belongs to him. Likewise, shall you do unto your oxen and unto your sheep. 7 days it shall be with his dame, or the female that birthed him, and on the 8th day you will give him to me. And if you shall be a holy unto me, neither shall you eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field. You shall cast it to the dogs. So, unfortunately, this is where the Gentiles get the title of dog from, because there's another law that says that an animal that's torn can be sold to the stranger that's in the gates. So of course they lot that over and said, oh, so we can't eat it. It must be given to dogs. So since we can sell it to you, you must be dogs. Unfortunately, that's the way that the logic can run sometimes. All right, let's go to chapter 23. Now, I apologize. It's going to be a very long reading today. So. You shall not raise a false report. Put not your hand unto the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. So this actually works both ways. We could think of you as being, let's say, somebody paid you off. So you're going to lie at the trial. You're being a false witness, right? So we know that's bad. But what if it's somebody like Charles Manson? Like, you were the only person who's a witness and you really didn't see anything. But if you'll give your testimony, we can put him away forever. We just need you to say you saw him do it. And that's when you get put in that moral dilemma where you're like, I want to get rid of this murder. We all know this man's a psychopath. You know, I'll give my testimony falsely that so that he'll be put away. Well, that's sin. You can't do that. Don't do it. You shall not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shall you speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment. So just because a bunch of people say the thing that is wrong and have agreed to do it, you better not do it. Don't you dare. You will not follow the multitude to do evil. And you got to understand, evil is against, let's just say Rah. It's probably Rah. It's probably what word. It's Exodus 23, verse 2. shall not follow, yes, to do Ra, evil, which is also the name of the sun god of Egypt. You're not going to do anything like that. And again, evil is those things which God has clearly told you are inappropriate for you to do as a person who is now bearing his name. So you may not, like a multitude be like, well, let's go and hang out at the gay pride parade today. It'll be fun. It's so fun when a bunch of gay men get together because they're so loud and hilarious and flaming. Well, unfortunately, you can't go do it because that would be you going and giving your support to that which is evil. And I know some people will say, well, then you can't go out and have anything to do with the world. Well, I don't want to take it that far. And I mean, I could be wrong. I don't think you should, turn away from people completely. Which is to say, if a gay man was to speak to me, I'd be, I have family members who are gay. I'm not chasing them around with a pitchfork and trying to burn them with a torch or something. But I understand that there's certain barriers I have to keep up in my life to maintain a certain degree of separation. It's not like I don't talk to them. I will talk to them. And it's not like I won't be in their presence. I will be in their presence. I'm just not going to agree that it's okay to do what is evil, because it's not okay. Admittedly, who am I to tell someone who doesn't want to be in covenant with God that they need to behave like a person who's in covenant with God? Now, of course, the Orthodox Jews would say, well, that's why there's the Noahide law, because God made it clear to even the Gentiles that He has expectations, and you are not to commit sexual immorality. In which case, I have to say, well, I can agree 100% in the land. Out of the land, I don't know if I have the authority to do anything like that. But that's neither here nor there. That's a huge can of worms that I better not open right now. All right, let's continue. Neither shall you countenance a poor man in his cause. You're like, countenance? What does that mean? Hadar is the word that's translated as countenance. To glorify him, to honor him, to be large and swollen, to make tamud, swollen or large. So, and Tammuz's the name of holy, I think that's like the holy places, the high places. So even he's saying the whole flip side of it, don't glorify a person being poor. Don't use them as an advantage for you to be able to try to get something, out of other people. It should be clear to them that there shouldn't be poor. Poor man should be able to go to somebody and say, hey, I need help. I'm an Israelite too. I want to be in covenant with the Most High God. I want to have the kind of life that you have. I want to be one of His people. Help me. And the door should be open. You've already been told you have to be hospitable to strangers. I mean, that's already been in a direct instruction from Him to you. If you meet your enemy's ox or an ass going astray, you will surely bring it back to him alive. And this word is enemy, is oyeb. Oyev. To be an adversary to anyone, to persecute him as an enemy, to hate. I believe that the original meaning is something along the word of breathing, blowing, puffing, an idea often applied to anger or hatred. Like, this person makes me mad when I see him. God, I can't stand him. Something along those lines. Even when it's a person like that, put your pride aside, get their animal, and take it to their house, and return it to them, and get back to doing what you need to do. If you see the ass of him that hates you lying under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, you shall surely help him with it. So take it like this. If you're driving down the road and you see somebody else broke down on the side of the road that you absolutely cannot stand, put your pride aside, stop and help him. You know, he's if anything can be said, Jehovah wants his people together and loving and caring for one. I mean, if you're going to be his people, you gotta have an open heart, because you got to remember he is geared towards the idea of having a family, and he expects the family that he has, his children, to love one another. You ain't necessarily got to like one another, but you better love one another. When someone's in need, you have to help them. Oh, man. These hard rules. And, of course, again, this is in the wilderness. There's a million people. You could be sure that a lot of them couldn't stand one another, and they may have came from different backgrounds. I mean, they got different tribes, naturally. Some of them may have been some of them slave masters. Some of them may have been some of them boys working for Pharaoh, whooping the other Jews, making sure they was doing what they were supposed to. You know, them quote-unquote Uncle Toms. The ones living in Pharaoh's house. And you can imagine some folks were like, I will never help that scumbag who I literally watched beat my grandfather to death. You know, but you got to put that aside. Put that pride aside, because all it is doing is damaging Israel. Because Israel's not just you. Israel is us. It is a people. You will, the ass under his burden. You shall not rest the judgment of the poor in his cause. You shall not rest the judgment of the poor. Let's see, what word is that? Shall not rest. Nata. That is to stretch out, extend, to bend, to incline, coming down, descending only, to stretch out, to extend. See if we can get some more cognate words. Stretch out and to extend. Often uses the hand of God in threatening. To extend, to elongate, to stretch, to unfold. And this is going to be one of those Haggadah moments where you're like, what exactly does it mean to not rest the judgment of the poor in his cause? I would assume it probably means don't try to stretch it out to the point that it becomes a non-issue anymore. In other words, when there's a cause and it's a poor person that needs judgment, execute the judgment. If they need you to take care of something for them, take care of it. Don't put it off. Don't wait till later. Don't say, well, they don't need it. It'll fix itself over time. I get a feeling that that's probably the right way to interpret that, but don't quote me, because I really don't know. Keep you far from a false matter, and the innocent and the righteous slay you not. For I will not justify the wicked. So, this sounds like instructions for judges. He's saying, stay away from anything that's false. If you know that something smells fishy, if you got a feeling that this is not on the up and up, or if you straight up know that it's not on the up and up, you better not slay the righteous or the innocent, because he did not put you in the position of judgment so you could do evil. That is not why you were put there. You shall not take a gift, for the gift blinds the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. So he's saying that obviously you don't accept a bribe. That's when someone's literally like, I'll give you money if you just rule in my favor. He's saying, take it down a notch. Don't accept a lunch date with the person to talk to you about the case. Don't let them give your stepsister a free vacation or something because they have a ticket or something, and they want to give it to somebody. And they say, well, let me give it to your family. I'm not going to use it. It's not a direct bribe. No, just don't. These are definitely sound like instructions for judges. Also, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strange in the land of Egypt. He says, and when there's a stranger in the land or among your people, and somebody tries to bring him up on a crime, and this is, you hear about this kind of stuff, like let's say you're driving your car and you're in another state. You got your license plate, says the state you're from on it, and Georgia, or no, just a state trooper or whoever, or let's just say some local cop sees you drive by and you're going, 8 or 9 over the speed limit. Normally they'd never pull anybody over for that, but they're like, well, they're an out-of-stater, so I'm going to get them. Because the out-of-stater, they ain't going to show up for the trial. They're not going to come from out of state to go and complain about this ticket to the judge and have the judge overthrow it and nothing like that. So we'll just get them because they're an easy mark. They're a stranger. Nobody knows them. Nobody's going to keep them safe. Nobody cares about strangers. No, that is not the way it goes in Israel. In Israel, you need to know what it's like to be a stranger. You need to know what it's like to be kicked out of and enslaved in the lands that are not your own. Even and I've been reading the Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. I'm going to keep plugging the book there. And in that book, we read how in the city of Alexandria in the 1st century A.D., Jews literally, the synagogue there, they had a 70-seat Sanhedrin. They had seats made of gold and silver with precious stones on them. But they were still a pariah to many people. The Jews were in charge of the trade of the wheat going from Egypt to come all the way to the city of Rome. They were well paid. They were bankers and tradesmen and people of power in the city, but they were still oppressed as Jews. And nobody'd ever let them forget, you're Jews and you don't belong here. The poor people were trained to hate them. Political officials trained people to hate them. They would always use them as the person that's who you need to be watching. Gotta watch those Jews because they're always out there making money and living off of you and parasiting you. Same thing you heard Hitler saying was being said in the 1st century A.D. by Roman consuls in Alexandria. Even though the Jews were running all kind of stuff and had so much money they could build golden thrones for the people in the Sanhedrin. Didn't matter. They were still hated, still disliked, still a stranger in a strange land. And that's exactly what he's saying to them is, you better not oppress the stranger. Don't you dare. All right. For 6 years you will sow your land and you will gather the fruits thereof. In the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie still, that the poor of the people may eat. And what they leave, the beast of the field shall eat. In like manner you shall deal with your vineyard and with your olive yard. So in the Shemitah, he's literally saying, like in the normal year cycle, typically like when they would harvest the fields, they would leave the corners of the fields for people to come and glean, like widows and orphans. It's kind of like that was considered your part of the field. Reading the book of Esther. The book of Ruth. Reading Ruth. Ruth is following the people as they're harvesting the field, and she's gleaning the grain that falls to the ground because it's completely acceptable practice for a poor person to come and glean the field after it's been harvested. And they oftentimes would leave whole stacks in the corners, which are for widows and orphans to come and eat from. Okay, so he's saying in the 7th year, during the Shemitah, take it the next step up. Let them roam around in your field that you haven't planted. Whatever grows of its own, let them eat of it just like you could eat of it. Think of it almost as a time when you're inviting them to have just as much as you have. They're not eating the crumbs. They're eating right there with you because the land is Yehovah's. And in the season that you have not prepared the land and planted the seed, and yet somehow stuff still grows, he's literally saying, it's my land anyways. I'm giving everybody this. Y'all come and eat all you want. Because, of course, in the 6th year of the Shemitah, it was expected that there would be a double harvest, enough that you would be able to save up as much grain as you needed anyways, and you shouldn't even have to worry about eating the next year. That was the idea. Now, as we know from history, they didn't keep the Shemitah. They didn't give the land its Sabbath, which causes, over time, not only the depletion of the soil, because I mean, a modern farmer will tell you got to rotate your crops regularly. You got to let fields sit fallow sometimes, or they're gonna die over time. But we saw that in Israel they didn't ever keep a Shemitah. It was never enforced, and that is why they ended up in captivity. All right, 6 days you shall do your work, and on the seventh you shall rest. You, your ox, your ass, the son of your handmaid, and the stranger, that they may be refreshed. So no, you definitely cannot force anybody to work. In fact, you're supposed to execute people that do work, but you definitely can't force nobody to do no work. You can't force an animal. You can't leave a burden on an animal. And this is why when Yeshua was in the synagogue and he healed on the Sabbath in the synagogue, right? And the Pharisees come and they say, "You're breaking the Sabbath law. You're doing work on the Sabbath." And he would say to him, "Is not the life of a man more important than the life of an ox?" And then he quoted the halakha. He quoted the halakha of the Pharisees. Says, if the stranger has an ox in the ditch, aren't you supposed to help him get it out? So here a man is under a heavy burden of having this, this ghastly deformity in his hand that causes him pain every day. So you don't want me to take that burden off of him, but you'd want me to take a burden off of an animal? Something doesn't add up, when you look at it that way. And you'll see that over and over again, that Yeshua he gets onto the Pharisees about certain aspects of the halakha. Not all of it, but certain aspects he gets on, particularly when it literally seems to walk contrary to what the Torah wants, because the Torah is the instructions for who the people are supposed to be. It's not supposed to be thought of as like, there's this big hole that's sin, and if anybody falls in, they're gone. No, it's more like life is a winding road, and here's how you walk down the winding road. When you come to a crossroad, this is how you pick which one you need to take. We don't need a fence all the way around the giant hole. We need good, strong reading skills to read the street signs when we see them. All right, let's see. In all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect. That means to look around. Make no mention of the names of other gods, neither let them be heard out of your mouth. 3 times shall you keep a feast unto me in the year, and you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, that you shall eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I have commanded you, in the time appointed of the month of Abib, for in that you came out of Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. So when you come to see him, don't come empty-handed. You need to bring him you're supposed to bring from the increase of your field, you're supposed to bring to him, which would be like you saying to him, "I know you did it, and here's what you did." You can't help but acknowledge his glory when you say that it's because of him that you have what you have. And another little side note, Abib is, according to Nehemiah Gordon, a condition that barley is in when the hail fell during the plagues. Some of the wheat was not killed because the wheat was not Abib. It was still in the very small stage at that point, but the barley was Abib, and it was destroyed at that time. It was mature. So that's why he says that you left Egypt in the month of Abib. So when the barley is matured to a certain point and the moon hits its new moon phase, if the barley is appropriately mature, if the moon is new, declare it the month of Abib. If the barley is not appropriately mature and you get that 12th moon, then you're going to have to go ahead and call that month, and they say Adar 2, and then you jump ahead, and the next month past that will be Nisan or Abib. 3 times a year shall all your males appear before me. You shall not offer the blood of your sacrifice with leavened bread, neither shall the fat of your sacrifice of my sacrifice remain until morning. The first of the first fruits of the land shall you bring into the house of Jehovah your Elohim, and you shall not seethe a kid in its mother's milk. Okay, so I think we saw that earlier in Genesis, something along those lines, which is why modern Jews do not eat milk and meat together. 3 times it states in the Torah, don't see the kid in its mother's milk, so they say it must have three separate meanings. It cannot all mean that particular ritual that was carried out by the Philistines for a fertility ritual. It must be referring to something else. Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if you shall indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto your enemies, and an adversary unto your adversaries. For mine angel shall go before you, bring you in unto the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. You shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works, but you shall utterly overthrow them, and quite break down their images. You shall serve Jehovah your Elohim, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I will take away sickness from the midst of you. There shall nothing cast their young, nor be barren in your land. The number of your days I will fill. That is a big promise. When you say that not a single female in the land will be barren, that my wife was told by the doctor that she would be barren. She was told she would be unable to have children. They tried to get her to have a hysterectomy when she was, I think, 24, 25. And that was before I was married to her. She agreed, scheduled the appointment, didn't show up for it, was pregnant within just a few months later, was pregnant with our daughter. She was told this couldn't happen. They were wrong, because that was the miracle that I needed to see to show me. See, I really didn't even think about the fact that Hannah was barren. I just kind of figured that, who knows, things could happen. But I cried out to Yehovah for help. And the next day she walked in and told me she was pregnant. And I was like, oh, is that what help is? And yes, it is, by the way, for men out there. That is the help. When you get some children, it changes your whole perspective on who you are and what you are supposed to be doing in the world. And I'm glad to say that Yehovah is not some stupid kid riding around on a rice rocket, filming himself on a GoPro, outrunning the cops. He's a family man, and he's interested in building his family, and I'm very, very glad for that. I'm very glad for that. I will send my fear among you, and I will destroy all the people to whom you shall come, and I will make all your enemies turn their backs unto you. I will send hornets before you, and they will drive out the Hivites and the Canaanites and the Hittites from before you. I will drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts of the field multiply against you. Now, the beasts of the field are the different kingdoms of men. And little by little I will drive them out before you until you increase and inherit the land. Oh, sorry, I will not drive them out in 1 year. Let me correct, since I didn't put the not in there. So he's basically saying, look, it ain't going to happen overnight. Because if it did happen overnight, there's not enough of you to occupy the entire space. And if you just wipe out people, land sometimes becomes a desert. Like, for instance, the Sahara Desert. It's literally almost as big as the United States. The entire United States could pretty much fit into the Sahara Desert in northern Africa. It didn't used to be that way. People were holding back the desert for a long time. In northern Africa, the Romans had established the system of roads. Of course, we all know about the Roman roads, but they had established a system of roads across northern Africa that had olive trees along them. And the olive trees, which grow great in dry, desolate conditions, they were holding the desert back. I mean, people were, through agriculture, they were pushing back the desert, keeping it at bay, keeping the roads clean and maintained. The person who cleaned and maintained the roads was allowed to harvest from the olive trees that were along the road. Even though they belonged to the state, They belonged to the Roman state, but the Romans would allow them, as payment for keeping the road up, they were able to collect from the trees along the road. For a long time, the desert was being held back until the coming of the Islamic revolution in that area, because a lot of Islamic believers were nomadic people. They came in with grazing animals and literally just ate all of the food that people had there. And there are cities still in northern Africa that, like in Rome, the Colosseum is there, or at least what's left of it, because it was quarried by people that lived in Rome. That means they took the stones that the whole Colosseum was built of, and they built their own houses. They took the stones out of the Colosseum and built their own houses with those nice stones, because the Roman government wasn't stopping them, because there wasn't really a Roman government by that time. So imagine the same thing in North Africa, except there are entire cities there which don't have any stones gone. Because when the desert came and claimed the land, nobody lived there anymore. There was no one to come and take the stones and build new houses and tear down the old ones. They were just gone. And so that's why Yehovah is saying it's not going to happen overnight, because we need people he needs people tending that land. He don't like the way they're doing it. He doesn't like that they're bringing corruption into his land, but they are keeping it from being consumed by the wilderness of the desert. So over time, he'll allow you to take over the land and to absorb it into the kingdom. Now we had, under the reign of King David, they said that they pushed the border of Israel all the way over to Babylon, all the way to the river Euphrates. The entire inheritance was under the jurisdiction of David at one point. All right. I will not drive them out in 1 year, but little by little I will drive them out before you until you have increased and inherit the land, until your numbers grow so you can actually fill it up. And I will set these bounds upon the Red Sea, even unto the sea of the Philistines, and from the desert unto the river, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest that they would make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare unto you. So snare, of course, what you to grab somebody, a trap, jerk them backwards. He's saying basically, if you don't get rid of these people, and you got to understand, it's not just by executing them. You can train them to be believers in Yehovah. You can teach them who Yehovah is. Let them see what you have, what he has done for you. Tell them what he did. Tell them the amazing. Give them the testimony. Give them the testimony. And if they ignore the testimony, well, then it's going to come to blows probably. Or you're just going to take their stuff and they're going to have to leave. And the only reason is because if you leave them there and let them stay, sooner or later, somebody's going to get you worshiping their gods. And of course, you see this happen with Solomon and his endless gods he put in the temple. You see this with Jezebel and Ahab, how a princess from another land, a small island country, by the way, tiny little island country, was able to literally knock Israel to its knees with Baal worship. Brought in Christmas and Easter. I mean, that's what it is she was having them do Christmas and Easter, because the Baal and Grove, right? Baal is a fire god. He's a god of the sun. He's a sun god. Generic term for sun god. And then Asherah poles are trees. You plant evergreen trees because they don't go, during the wintertime, they don't turn brown. They stay green, which gives them the appearance of being evergreen, thus the name, and it makes them seem to be alive and full of life all the time. They don't die with the rest of the world. They're these miracle trees that don't turn brown, don't shed their leaves. For some reason, the thing that's killing the rest of the world, aka the winter, doesn't seem to kill them. So they became symbols of everlasting life. So Jezebel brings this in with her. Ahab's her husband. He hops on board with it. I mean, he didn't snap his finger and say, "That ain't coming in this country, woman." He didn't do none of that. He went right along with it. And I think I can't remember who his contemporary king was down in Judah, but he was best friends with the king of Judah. They didn't have a problem with each other. They weren't at war with each other. They weren't fighting over much anything. In fact, they were hanging out, Jezebel style with each other and letting these priests of Baal and prophetesses of Asherah, have free run of the nation. And that caused such a problem that out of nowhere we see Elijah appear. And nobody even knows what tribe he was a part of, because all it says is he was a Tishbite. Not sure what Tishbite is, but he was this man who came up and just laid the law down. I mean, he literally said there'll be no rain and took off running to escape the wrath of Jezebel, but he did not back down. He made sure that what God had said was said, and then he ran for his life. So he's a good guy. But it just goes to show sometimes Jehovah has to send the heavy hitters. And prophets are heavy hitters. When a prophet comes into town, that's the kind of town that people need to be afraid. When a prophet shows up in town, it's because he's got one message: return to the covenant or die. That's the message. So you want to see fire rain down from heaven? Let a prophet come to town. You want to see the priest of Baal? You want to see an altar light on fire with no explanation that's been soaked in water that should never burn? Call a prophet to town. You want to see 500 priests get murdered in one day? Call a prophet to town. They bring a heavy hand sometimes when they come. You shouldn't think of it as like in a modern church. I shouldn't say everybody. There's a lot of people who refer to themselves as prophet and prophetess, but honestly, if they really were prophets and prophetesses, like in the old biblical days, people would get nervous when they came into room because they would be scared for their lives and the lives of their children and for their land and for their animals and everything else. Because when a prophet shows up, it's because God has judgment to be stated. Okay, so let's read from chapter 24. And we're moving along here, even though, it's a big read today. And I know I'm talking a lot. I think what we'll do is we'll read through the Old Testament part, and then later today I'll get back together with JR, and we'll discuss the new covenant. He's got a lot of notes, and we'll talk about the renewed covenant, and basically we'll hear a lot of this again, because what we're reading now is law, and this is law for man to man, judges to the men. We haven't really got to priestly stuff yet. This is just what he expects of every man, because it says every male will come and see me, not just the firstborn males. Firstborn males belong to him, but every male has to come and present himself before him. All right, chapter 24 here. Let me see if how far into 24. It's probably out the whole chapter, but I'll check. All right, to verse 18. Chapter 24, verse 18. That is the entire chapter. And he said unto Moshe, come up unto Jehovah you, and Aaron, and Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel, and worship you afar off. And Moses alone shall come near unto Jehovah, but they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with them. And Moses came and told the people all the words of Jehovah and all the judgments, and all the people answered in one voice, and said, all the words which Jehovah hath said, we will do. That's an agreement. That's a legally binding oral contract. And Moshe wrote all the words of Jehovah, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrifices, peace offerings and oxen unto Jehovah. And Moshe took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. He took the book of the covenant. This is the blood covenant, by the way. That's why he just split. He's like, all these sacrifices, we're going to split the blood. Half of it's going all on this altar, and you can imagine that was a lot of blood. That altar was soaked with layer upon layer upon layer of blood. And put the other blood in the basins, and he took the blood in the basins, and he sprinkled half on the altar, and he took the book of the covenant, and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that Jehovah hath said we will do, and be obedient. This is a blood covenant. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, and said, Behold, the blood of the covenant, which Jehovah hath made with you concerning all these words. Then went up Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel. And they saw the Elohim of Israel, and under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, as it were the body of heaven in his clearness. And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he laid not his hand. Also they saw Elohim, and did eat and drink. And Jehovah said to Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there, and I will give you tables of stone, and a law, and my commandments which I have written, and that you mayest teach them. And Moshe rose up, and his minister Joshua. And Moshe went up into the mount of God, and he had said unto the elders, Tarry you here until we come again to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man have any matters to do, let him come unto them. And Moshe went up to the mount in the cloud, and he was covered on the mount. And the glory of Jehovah abode upon Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And the 7th day he called unto Moshe out of the midst of the cloud. And on the side of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moshe went into the midst of the cloud, and got him up onto the mount. And Moses was on the mount 40 days and 40 nights. And by the way, this is probably what the call to the clouds in Thessalonians is talking about. Because your God is a consuming fire, right? 6 days, 7th day. So during this time is where the rabbinical teachers say that they get their authority. Like, the words of Moses were written down, yes. But while they were up on the mountain, the 70 elders of Israel, along with Aaron and Hur, were, not only debating what it is, how to do these things that God wants done, and figuring out the questions they were going to need to ask to Moses, but apparently they were also receiving divine instruction, and part of that divine instruction is what has been passed on today, which allows people the ability to properly execute the mitzvah, or the instructions that Yehovah has given to his people. And that is part of the explanation of where the modern rabbinism or Phariseeism comes from, is to say that it directly has its roots in the 70 elders going up on the mountain with Moses. All right, 2 Kings 11:17. We're going to read the half-Torah portion, Torah. That's 2 Kings 11:17. All right, yep. Battery's getting a little low. 2 Kings 11:17, and we're going to read all the way through to 2 Kings 18. Second Kings 12, I think it's 12:18. And Jehoiada made a covenant between Jehovah and the king and the people, that they should be Jehovah's people between the king also and the people. And all the people of the land went into the house of Baal, and brake it down. His altars and his images brake they down into pieces, and slew Matan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priests anointed officers over the house of Jehovah. And he took the rulers over hundreds, and the captains and the guard, and all the people of the land, and they brought down the king from the house of Jehovah, and came by the way of the gate of the guards of the king's house, and he sat on the throne of the kings. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet. And they slew Athaliah. That's Jezebel's daughter. And they slew Athaliah with the sword beside the king's house. 7 years old was Joash when he began to reign. So you're about to have a 7-year-old boy running Israel. And you got to understand why there's the 7-year-old boy is the only bloodline heir left. Because Athaliah killed all her other grandchildren and anyone else that could have been a threat to her power. Athaliah is the first woman to declare herself queen of Israel. I'll take you back to the beginning here. 2 Kings 11. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all of the seed royal. Okay? But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons, which were slain. And they hid, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. He was hid from her in the house of Jehovah 6 years, and Athaliah did reign over the land. So you got to understand, this woman murdered her grandsons because she wanted to be king of Israel. This is Jezebel's daughter. Okay, well, that's Ahab and Jezebel's daughter. I mean, I can't just blame Jezebel, right? That's Ahab's daughter too. But she murdered her grandchildren so she could reign over Israel for 6 years. So, don't you weep for her. Don't you dare. Okay? This woman was bad news. And honestly, perfect inheritor of Jezebel's title. She took it the next step up. She wasn't just a lover of Baal. She was a lover of herself and a lover of Baal. But Joash has now become king. Little boy has become king. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash began to reign. And 40 years he reigned in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Abiah of Beersheba. And Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of Jehovah all the days wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. So that was like his dad, because the high priest became his dad, because he was given. What had happened is he was given to the temple. His mother knew the only way she could keep him safe was to give him to the temple. And, that way she could shield him from the political machinations of Athaliah. But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places. And Joash said to the priest, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of Jehovah, even the money of everyone that passed the count, the money that every man is set at, and all the money that comes into a man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord. Let the priest take it to them, every man of his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house, wherefore any breach shall be found. And it was so, that there in the 23rd year of King Joash, the priest had not repaired the breaches of the house. And King Joash called for Jehoiada the priest, and other priests, and said to them, why repair you not the breaches of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintance, but deliver it for the breaches of the house. He's like, so quit taking the money that's being given to the temple and using it for your own projects, and fix the temple. He's like, fix the building, y'all. And the priest consented to receive no more money of the people, neither to repair the breaches of the house. So he's like, look, I'm going to let you take in no more money if you're not going to fix this building. They're like, well, fine, then we won't take any more money. But Jehoiada, the priest, took a chest and bore a hole in the lid of it, and he set it beside the altar on the right side as one comes into the house of Jehovah. And the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of Jehovah. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up and put up into bags, and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. So that they actually started counting how much was coming in. And to the masons and the hewers of stone to buy timber and hewn stone to repair the breaches in the house of the Lord, for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. Howbeit that there was not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, any vessel of gold, any vessel of silver, of the money that was brought into the house. But they gave that to the workmen to repair therein the house of Jehovah. Moreover, they reckoned not with these men unto whose hands they delivered the money to be bestowed on the workmen, for they dealt faithfully. The trespass money and sin money was brought into the house of Jehovah, it was the priests. When Hazael, king of Syria, went up and fought against Goth and took it, Hazael set his face up to go to Jerusalem. And Joash, the king of Judah, took all the hallowed things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Azahiah, his fathers, kings of Judah, had dedicated, and his own hallowed things, and all that gold that was found into the treasures of the house of Jehovah and the king's house, and sent it to Hazael, king of Syria, and he went away from Jerusalem. And the rest of the book of Acts, and the rest of the acts of Joash, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And his servants arose and made a conspiracy and slew Joash in the house of Milo, which goeth down to Silia. And Jozachar, the son of Shemaiah, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomer, his servants, smote him, and he died, and they buried him in the fathers in the house of the city of David. And Amaziah, his son, reigned in his stead. So, apparently, I'm not sure if I don't know if they're just recording what happened or if they're letting us know that they should have torn down those high places too. But apparently there's a problem about, from what I'm reading here, I got a feeling that some of the money that's coming in to the temple is being considered by the priest probably as unclean and not, like it shouldn't be used for the temple, probably because it's got something to do with collection at the high places or something like that. It sounds like that's why they're having this issue, because they're defining some of the money as belonging to the priest, but some of the sin offerings, see, they said because the money they took in, they did not use to make any of the silver snuffers or the basins or trumpets, any of those things that you would think of as set-apart vessels. They didn't use it for any of that. And they didn't even do an accounting of how they paid out the men for the work that they did, because whoever these guys were, were considered so faithful that they just gave them the money and said, just pay the guys. We don't need to keep a royal record of this or whatever. To do some more research on why this priest put a collection box out, basically. He bore in a hole, lit it, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one comes to the temple, and the priest. And they kept the door, but put therein all the money that was brought into the house of Jehovah. And it was so, when they saw there was much money in the chest, the king's scribe came up, and they gave the money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work and the oversight of the house. Let me see if I can, priest, let's see, belongs. That phrase, to the priest, said to the priest, all the money dedicated things that is brought into the house of Jehovah, even money, every one that is passed of the account, the money that every man is set at, and all the money that comes into a man's heart to bring. Okay. So basically he's like, look, I'm not going to ask you from your own monies that have been brought to you to pay for these repairs. Just all the things that are not straight up definitely the money that belongs to the priest, and let's just let people give whatever they want to give, and we'll make a collection box, which is exactly what the priest did. He literally made a collection chest, and we'll just fill it up, and we'll pay the people out of that, and we'll get this thing fixed for you. So that's good. It sounds like the king, and of course you got to remember this is a kid. Let's see, reign here. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash began to reign, and 40 years he reigned in Jerusalem. So at this point, he's a 8-year-old boy, something like that. And he's like, well, we'll just let everybody donate what they want. We're not going to take anything from you. Sounds like wisdom. Of course, he was also being instructed by the high priest the whole time. So I don't know. This is one of those, we're kind of jumping in the midst of a story here, because this is the end of the reign of Athaliah, and there's no telling how bad it was under her. And then, and remember, that's Jezebel's daughter. So she married she was a royal princess, Ahab's royal princess daughter, who married the royal line down there in Judah. So in a certain sense, they were actually, even though the two kingdoms were split, the marriage of Athaliah to a Judah prince would have actually sealed the gap between their family lines. But of course, it was all being done under the guidance of Baal. So obviously, that's not how you fix things. Well, when we come back later, I'm going to charge up my phone and give JR time to get done with his home group he's working with. And we'll come back later today and we'll read from Matthew and Hebrews and Mark and Acts concerning how we see, and this is the point of a Torah portion. You learn the law, you learn the Torah, you learn what Moses said, you learn what the instruction was directly from Yehovah. You see it repeated, hopefully, or disobeyed in the prophets and the histories, and then we continue on down the road, because you got to remember, 1,500 years later is the time of Yeshua after Moses. About 1,500 years before we see Yeshua. And at that point, Israel's already been kicked off the land, thrown into exile, allowed to return, and then eventually, exiled again. And when you add all that up, you look at the New Testament, and people are like, well, God's sick of dealing with Jews. He ain't going to deal with them. No, there's this new thing. No, that's not true. No. He's not sick of dealing with them. He's dealing with them. He's dealing with his bride. He's correcting her. He's putting her out in the house. He's whooping her when he's got to. He's selling her into slavery, because that's apparently what she wants, because she keeps slaving herself out to these other gods. And over time, when the time is right, he'll get back. He'll open that door back up and let her back in, and she will be a good wife to him. She won't be a harlot anymore. That's the hope. And then she can actually do her job as a priest, which is to spread his glory. Because you gotta understand, even when he threw her out into the wilderness, he's like, I'm gonna spread you out to these other nations of the world, because you're going to declare my glory to them. So it's not just punishment. There's a purpose there. They are meant to declare his glory among the nations. And when it has gone on long enough, the nations themselves will send the Jews back. And when I say the Jews, I mean in that sense of that Roman second Jew. Yes, bloodline heirs and the spiritual ones too. That means if you really are the real deal and God has got a hold of you, you are going to become so clearly one of his people that you're going to have this mark on your forehead that says, I'm a Jew too. And people will be like, God, I can't stand Jews. And then be like, oh, you're one of them too. And be like, well, I mean, really? I'm not. Like, yeah, you're one of them. Get out of here. You're still going to have the mark on you, even whether you realize it was going to happen to you or not. Because your behavior and your practices are going to be so similar that people that don't know nothing about it aren't going to be able to tell you apart. They're not going to know how you are, that you happen to think that Yeshua is the Messiah and that you owe your life to him and that you're a slave. All they're going to see is you're just one more Jew, and y'all need to go back to your land. Yeah, that's the way it'll be looked at. I'm given the less than rosy description, and I'm sure there's many rosy descriptions where people are like, we need to help you return to your land because we love Yehovah too, and but he said, I'll send the fishers first to fish you out, and then I'll send hunters, and when the hunters come, you're going to get found. Okay. So for right now, like I said, we'll take a break. We'll come back in a few hours, and we will be discussing some Brit Hadashah writings that are going to reiterate a lot of what we've read here. All right. Shalom. Baruch haba Yehovah. Be blessed in the name of Yehovah. Amen.